Rich girl Amelia Carter hid her beauty for a blind date, but the handsome CEO fell for her at first sight before learning the shocking secret she had spent 5 years desperately trying to keep buried. The billionaire heiress arrived at the blind date wearing plain clothes, oversized glasses, and a simple hairstyle because she was tired of men chasing her beauty and her family's fortune instead of her heart. But the moment Alexander Hayes, a handsome billionaire CEO, saw her kindness, warmth, and quiet strength, he couldn't stop thinking about her. He didn't know she was rich. He didn't know fate had already connected their lives years earlier. And he certainly didn't know she was carrying a secret powerful enough to change everything he believed about their past. For Amelia, this blind date was supposed to be a fresh start. But for Alexander, it was the beginning of a mystery he never saw coming. As the rich girl and the handsome CEO found themselves drawn to each other once again, Amelia's fear grew stronger with every passing day. Because the shocking secret she was hiding wasn't just about her. It was about him too. It was a truth born from a love story that ended too soon, a truth that had silently shaped both of their lives for 5 long years. Why did Amelia panic whenever the past threatened to resurface? What really happened after she and Alexander were torn apart years ago? And when the handsome CEO finally uncovers the shocking secret hidden behind that blind date, will it lead him to the greatest blessing of his life? Or the heartbreak he never expected? The morning sunlight streamed through the towering windows of the Carter estate, illuminating crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and priceless artwork collected from around the world. The mansion reflected the success of Richard Carter, one of the country's wealthiest hotel magnates whose luxury hotel empire stretched across multiple cities. His only daughter, Amelia Carter, had grown up surrounded by privilege and wealth, yet neither had protected her from heartbreak. Standing before a mirror inside her enormous bedroom, Amelia carefully studied her reflection. Then she began making herself look less beautiful. One by one, she rejected the elegant dresses hanging inside her walk-in closet. Instead, she chose a loose cream-colored sweater several sizes too large, dark trousers that concealed her figure, and a pair of flat shoes. She removed every trace of makeup from her face and tied her long chestnut hair into a tight bun. Finally, she placed oversized glasses with thick, dark frames over her eyes. The transformation was remarkable. The glamorous billionaire heiress, who occasionally appeared beside her father in business magazines, seemed to disappear. An ordinary woman stood in her place. Her cousin Emma watched from the doorway in disbelief. "You spent 30 minutes trying to make yourself look less attractive." Amelia laughed. "When you say it like that, it sounds ridiculous." "Because it is ridiculous." Emma walked into the room. "Why not just be yourself?" A shadow crossed Amelia's face. "Because being myself never works." 5 years earlier, during a coastal charity retreat, Amelia had fallen deeply in love with a man who made her forget she was rich. During that unforgettable week, she had worn flowing summer dresses, laughed freely, and allowed herself to believe she had found something real. Then everything ended. No returned calls. No messages. No explanation. The pain of that disappearance had never fully healed. What Amelia didn't know was that the same man had spent 5 years believing she was the one who abandoned him. And if he saw her today, hidden beneath oversized glasses, plain clothing, and a completely different appearance, he would never imagine she was the woman he had never forgotten. Across the city, Alexander Hayes stood inside the executive boardroom of Hayes Technologies, a billion-dollar company whose innovations had made him one of the youngest and most successful CEOs in the country. Through the towering glass windows behind him, the city's skyline stretched endlessly, reflecting the empire he had spent years building. The meeting had ended several minutes earlier, but Alexander remained seated at the head of the table, reviewing the final pages of a major acquisition agreement. His executives trusted his judgment completely. Investors followed his decisions closely. Business magazines frequently featured him on their covers. Yet despite all his success, There was one chapter of his life he had never been able to close. "You're thinking about her again, aren't you?" Alexander looked up. Ryan Brooks stood near the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. Tall, confident, and charismatic, Ryan had been Alexander's closest friend for nearly 10 years. They had built businesses together, traveled together, and shared countless personal struggles. Alexander accepted the coffee. "I don't know what you're talking about." Ryan laughed. "You always say that." For a brief moment, Alexander's thoughts drifted backward. 5 years earlier. A coastal charity retreat. Warm ocean air. Sunlight reflecting across the water. A beautiful young woman in a flowing white summer dress laughing as she helped children build sandcastles near the beach. Amelia. Even now, the memory remained painfully vivid. For one unforgettable week, they had been inseparable. Then she vanished. No replies. No returned calls. Nothing. Alexander had spent years convincing himself to move on. Some days he almost succeeded. Across from him, Ryan's smile faded slightly. The sight of Amelia's name still affected Alexander more than Ryan liked. Because there was something Alexander didn't know. 5 years earlier, Ryan had fallen for Amelia too. He had asked her out. She had gently turned him down. And then he watched her fall in love with his best friend. The memory still burned. A notification suddenly appeared on Alexander's phone. Reminder, blind date tonight. Ryan smirked. Maybe it's finally time you stop chasing ghosts. Neither man realized that fate had already arranged something far more complicated than either of them expected. The restaurant occupied the top floor of one of the city's most luxurious hotels, offering breathtaking views of the skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the elegant dining room, while soft piano music floated through the air. It was the kind of place where wealthy people came to impress one another. Amelia arrived first. As she followed the hostess through the restaurant, several guests barely glanced in her direction. The oversized glasses hid much of her face. The loose cream-colored sweater concealed her elegant figure. Her hair was tightly pulled into a simple bun, making her look nothing like the radiant young woman who had once walked along a coastline in flowing summer dresses. Exactly as she intended. For years, Amelia had learned that beauty often attracted attention from the wrong people. Tonight, she wanted honesty. Not admiration. Not wealth seekers. Just honesty. As she approached her table, a sudden crash shattered the calm atmosphere. An elderly waitress carrying a tray of drinks stumbled. Glasses fell to the floor. Several customers frowned with irritation. One businessman muttered impatiently. The elderly woman looked mortified. "I'm sorry," she said repeatedly. "I'm so sorry." Before anyone else moved, Amelia hurried toward her. "Are you hurt?" she asked. The woman shook her head, clearly embarrassed. "I ruined everyone's evening." "No, you didn't." Amelia knelt beside her and helped gather the larger pieces of broken glass, while another employee brought cleaning supplies. The older woman's eyes filled with gratitude. Meanwhile, the restaurant doors opened. Alexander Hayes stepped inside. His attention immediately shifted toward the small crowd surrounding the waitress. Then he saw Amelia. Not her wealth, not her beauty, only her kindness. Something about her felt strangely familiar. He couldn't explain why. The hostess approached him. "Mr. Hayes, your blind date is waiting." Alexander followed her gaze. His heart skipped unexpectedly. The woman helping the waitress was standing beside his table. The thick-framed glasses, plain clothing, and years of separation prevented recognition. Yet as Amelia looked up, both experienced the same strange feeling. As though they had met somewhere before. Neither realized that fate was quietly giving their unfinished love story a second chance. For several seconds, Amelia and Alexander simply stood there looking at each other. Neither recognized the other. Yet neither could ignore the strange feeling that had suddenly settled between them. It felt familiar, comfortable, almost as if they had started a conversation years ago and were only now returning to finish it. Alexander pulled out a chair for her. "Please." "Thank you." Once they were seated, a waiter handed them menus before quietly leaving. Amelia glanced at the menu, but barely read it. Something about Alexander's voice kept pulling at her memory. The feeling was unsettling, yet strangely comforting. Alexander broke the silence first. "I have to admit, you're not what I expected." A smile appeared on Amelia's face. "Should I be worried?" "Not at all." The answer came quickly. Too quickly. Alexander surprised himself. Most blind dates felt forced. This one didn't. As their conversation continued, the hours seemed to move faster. They discussed favorite books, dream destinations, childhood memories, and causes they cared about. Neither mentioned wealth. Neither revealed their true identity. And neither noticed how naturally the walls around their hearts were beginning to fall. At one point, Alexander mentioned volunteering during charity projects. The comment triggered a sudden flash in Amelia's mind. For a split second, she saw a beach, children laughing, ocean waves rolling onto the shore, a tall man carrying boxes of supplies beside her. The image vanished before she could fully grasp it. Across the table, Alexander experienced something similar. The way Amelia laughed reminded him of someone. The way she listened reminded him of someone. Even the gentle kindness in her eyes stirred memories he couldn't quite reach. 5 years earlier, he had spent an unforgettable week beside a woman who made him believe in fate. But the Amelia sitting across from him looked nothing like the woman from those memories. The oversized glasses concealed her face. The plain clothes hid her elegance. The years had blurred details he once thought he would never forget. Then the elderly waitress returned with their drinks. She smiled warmly at Amelia. "Thank you again for helping me." Amelia smiled back. "It was nothing." The waitress shook her head. "No, dear, kindness is never nothing." Neither realized how true those words would become before their story was over. By the time dinner arrived, neither Amelia nor Alexander had noticed how much time had passed. What was supposed to be a simple blind date had stretched into an entire evening. Around them, guests came and went, but their conversation continued effortlessly. For Amelia, the feeling was both comforting and dangerous. Comforting because she hadn't connected with anyone this naturally in years. Dangerous because the more Alexander smiled, the harder it became to ignore the strange familiarity she felt whenever she looked at him. "You seem distracted," Alexander said. Amelia blinked. "Do I?" "A little." She laughed softly. "Maybe I'm just surprised." "About what?" "About how easy this feels." Alexander smiled. "I was thinking the same thing." For a brief moment, neither looked away. Then a memory surfaced inside Amelia's mind. 5 years earlier, a coastal charity retreat organized by several major companies. Volunteers helping local families. Children running across the beach. A handsome stranger carrying food supplies alongside her. The same stranger spending hours talking with her beneath a sunset sky. The memory felt vivid, almost real. Across the table, Alexander experienced a similar flash. He remembered laughing with a young woman who wore flowing summer dresses and left her hair loose in the ocean breeze. He remembered helping her build temporary shelters for struggling families. He remembered thinking he had never met anyone like her. Then the image disappeared. Back in the present, neither realized they were remembering each other. Meanwhile, across town, Ryan Brooks sat alone in his office. A photograph rested inside one of his desk drawers. "Amelia." The picture had been taken during the retreat 5 years earlier. Ryan stared at it silently. He still remembered the day he confessed his feelings, and the gentle rejection that followed. "You're a wonderful friend, Ryan, but my heart belongs to someone else." The words had never truly left him. Now fate had unexpectedly brought Amelia and Alexander together again. And if Ryan discovered what was happening, old jealousy might become a very dangerous thing. Because some secrets don't stay buried forever. And neither do old obsessions. Neither Amelia nor Alexander wanted the evening to end. By the time they finally left the restaurant, the city lights glittered against the night sky, and the cool evening breeze carried a quiet sense of possibility. For the first time in years, Amelia found herself smiling on the drive home. For the first time in years, Alexander found himself replaying a date long after it ended. Standing beside her car, Alexander hesitated. There was something he wanted to say. Something he hadn't expected to feel after a blind date. "I'd like to see you again." The words came naturally. Amelia felt her heart skip. "So would I." A smile spread across Alexander's face. Neither noticed how relieved the other looked. As Amelia drove away, Alexander remained standing in the parking lot for several moments. A strange thought crossed his mind. The woman he had spent the evening with felt familiar in a way he couldn't explain. Not because of her appearance. If anything, the oversized glasses, tightly pulled hair, and loose clothing made her look completely different from the woman he remembered from years ago. Yet something deeper felt familiar. Something he couldn't quite reach. The next afternoon, Amelia sat inside a quiet neighborhood cafe, reviewing documents for one of her father's charity projects. Her phone buzzed. A message from Alexander. "Good morning." A smile immediately appeared on her face. Before she could respond, another small voice interrupted. "Mommy." Amelia's heart nearly stopped. She looked up. A young boy with bright eyes and an energetic smile came running toward her from the children's reading corner at the other end of the cafe. Without thinking, she stood and opened her arms. The little boy threw himself into them. "I finished my book." "You did," Amelia laughed. "I'm proud of you." Several nearby customers smiled at the sweet interaction. To Amelia, it was an ordinary moment. To fate, it was the beginning of everything changing. A few minutes later, while helping Noah choose a snack, Amelia never noticed a familiar black luxury vehicle slowing outside the cafe. Inside sat Alexander. He had been driving to a nearby meeting. His eyes briefly landed on the window, then froze. Because through the glass, he saw Amelia. And standing beside her was a young child. A child she had never mentioned. Alexander's hands tightened slightly around the steering wheel. For several seconds, he remained parked outside the cafe, staring through the window. He wasn't angry. He was confused. The woman he had spent hours talking to the previous evening had never once mentioned a child. Inside the cafe, Amelia helped Noah choose a chocolate muffin before sitting beside him at a small table near the window. The little boy spoke excitedly, while Amelia listened with complete attention. Alexander found himself watching the scene longer than he intended. There was something beautiful about it. Something warm. Something undeniably genuine. Yet questions immediately began forming inside his mind. Why hadn't she told him? Most parents naturally mentioned their children, especially during a long conversation that covered family, dreams, and personal history. The omission felt significant. Eventually, Alexander forced himself to drive away. But the image stayed with him throughout the day. Meanwhile, inside the cafe, Noah continued chatting happily. At 5 years old, he possessed endless curiosity and enough energy to exhaust most adults. "Mommy, are you smiling because of your new friend?" Amelia nearly choked on her coffee. "Noah." The boy grinned mischievously. You smiled at your phone 3 times. Amelia laughed despite herself. The observation was accurate. For the first time in years, she had genuinely enjoyed getting to know someone. Yet beneath that happiness lived an old fear. 5 years earlier, she had trusted her heart completely. The result had been heartbreak. As Noah returned to his book, Amelia's thoughts drifted backward. A coastal sunset. Alexander promising to call after the retreat. The excitement she felt waiting for his first message. Then the confusion. The silence. The unanswered calls. The growing realization that he wasn't coming back. The memory still hurt. Across town, Alexander sat in his office trying unsuccessfully to focus on work. Instead, he kept remembering the child. Then another detail surfaced. The boy's smile. For some reason, it seemed strangely familiar. Alexander shook his head. It was probably his imagination. But somewhere in the back of his mind, a tiny seed of curiosity had already been planted. And before long, that curiosity would grow into a question capable of changing all 3 of their lives forever. 2 days later, Alexander and Amelia met again for dinner. This time, the atmosphere felt different. The connection was still there. The laughter came just as easily. Yet beneath Alexander's calm exterior, a question refused to disappear. Throughout the evening, he found himself studying Amelia whenever she wasn't looking. Not suspiciously, just curiously. The image of the child remained firmly planted in his mind. Eventually, he decided to ask, "Can I ask you something personal?" Amelia immediately sensed the seriousness in his voice. Her stomach tightened. "Of course." Alexander hesitated. Then he spoke carefully. "The other day, I saw you at a cafe." The color slowly drained from Amelia's face. Everything inside her froze. Alexander noticed immediately. "I wasn't trying to spy on you," he said quickly. "I happened to drive by." Amelia forced a smile. "I understand." For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Alexander asked the question she had secretly feared. "Why didn't you tell me about him?" The words landed heavily between them. Amelia lowered her eyes. Because she knew he wasn't asking about a child. He was asking about trust. "He wasn't relevant to our first conversation," she answered softly. Alexander nodded. The explanation made sense. Yet something still felt incomplete. "Are you divorced?" he asked gently. "No." "Was there someone else?" A painful flash crossed Amelia's face. "There was once." Alexander noticed the sadness immediately. He didn't press further. But curiosity continued growing. Meanwhile, across town, Ryan Brooks sat in his office reviewing a business proposal when his phone buzzed. A mutual acquaintance had sent him a photograph. The image showed Alexander and Amelia leaving a restaurant together. Ryan's expression darkened instantly. "No." The word escaped before he could stop it. 5 years earlier, he had destroyed their relationship because he couldn't bear watching Amelia choose someone else. Now fate was bringing them together again. A dangerous feeling settled inside him. Fear. Because if Amelia and Alexander started talking about the past, the truth might finally surface. And if that happened, Alexander would learn that his closest friend had stolen 5 years from his life. For the first time in years, Ryan realized he had something to lose. And desperate people often make dangerous decisions. Ryan Brooks had barely slept. The photograph of Alexander and Amelia together sat open on his phone screen long after midnight. 5 years earlier, he had convinced himself that separating them was the only way to have a chance with Amelia. When that failed, he had buried the truth and moved on with his life. Or at least he thought he had. Now the past was returning. And it was threatening everything. The following afternoon, Ryan invited Alexander to lunch under the excuse of discussing business. As they sat across from each other, Ryan casually brought up the subject. I heard you've been seeing someone. Alexander smiled slightly. News travels fast. Ryan forced a laugh. Is it serious? Alexander thought about Amelia. About the ease of their conversations. About how naturally she fit into his life. It might become serious. The answer hit Ryan harder than expected. He immediately changed the subject, but his mind was already racing. Meanwhile, Amelia picked Noah up from school. The little boy came running through the gates carrying a drawing. Mommy, look. Amelia knelt beside him. The picture showed 3 people holding hands beneath a bright blue sky. A woman, a little boy, and a man. Her smile slowly faded. Who's this? She asked gently. Noah pointed to the man. My dad. Amelia's heart squeezed painfully. The question she feared most came next. When is he coming? For a moment, she couldn't answer. 5 years of guilt and uncertainty pressed against her chest. Before she could speak, Noah continued innocently. Do you think he'd like me? Tears threatened to form in Amelia's eyes. Very much. She meant every word. Across town, Alexander sat alone in his office when a strange thought suddenly surfaced. Noah looked about 5 years old. Almost exactly 5. The same amount of time that had passed since the coastal retreat. The same retreat where he and Amelia had fallen in love. A chill moved through him. Then another memory surfaced. The boy's eyes. The smile. The shape of his face. For the first time, Alexander stopped dismissing the resemblance. His heartbeat began to quicken. Because a possibility he had never considered before was beginning to form. And once that thought entered his mind, he couldn't make it leave. He needed answers. And he was finally ready to ask the questions that neither of them could avoid anymore. The following evening, Amelia arrived at the restaurant with a heavy heart. She knew there was no running from the truth anymore. The moment she sat down, she noticed something different about Alexander. His expression was calm. But beneath that calmness lived questions that had been building for days. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Alexander finally broke the silence. How old is Noah? Amelia's heart stopped. The question she had feared for 5 years had finally arrived. She lowered her eyes. He's 5. Alexander swallowed hard. The answer confirmed what his instincts had already begun telling him. And his father. Tears filled Amelia's eyes. For years, she had imagined this conversation. None of those imagined versions felt as difficult as the real thing. You. Silence. The entire restaurant seemed to disappear around them. Alexander stared at her. Unable to speak. Unable to move. Amelia fought to keep her voice steady as she told him everything. The coastal retreat. The promises they made. The calls she placed. The messages she sent. The weeks she spent waiting. The pregnancy. The heartbreak. Then she revealed the one thing she had never understood. I thought you abandoned me. Alexander's face tightened. I called you for months. Amelia looked up in shock. I called you too. Both froze. The contradiction made no sense. Until another voice interrupted. Because neither of you received the messages. Ryan stood a few feet away. Pale. Defeated. The guilt he had hidden for 5 years finally visible. The truth spilled out. The blocked number. The deleted messages. The lies. The jealousy. The betrayal. Everything. Alexander could barely believe what he was hearing. His closest friend had stolen 5 years from him. 5 years with the woman he loved. 5 years with his son. Ryan quietly apologized before walking away, knowing some mistakes could never be undone. At that moment, the elderly waitress from their first date approached their table. She had witnessed part of the confrontation. Smiling warmly at Amelia, she said, "I told you kindness finds its way back." Then she left. Alexander turned toward Amelia. Without hesitation, he reached across the table and took her hand. "You should have told me sooner." "I know, but we're not losing another day." Hours later, Alexander knelt before a surprised little Noah. "Would it be okay if I became part of your life?" Noah threw his arms around him. And for the first time, the missing pieces finally fit together. Months later, surrounded by family and friends, Alexander proposed. As Amelia said yes, he smiled at the family fate had returned to him. He had arrived at a blind date, expecting to meet a stranger. Instead, he found the woman he never stopped loving, the truth he never knew, and the family he had been missing all along.